And that there is a Trump's 20-point plan which involves among other things the complete disarmament of Hamas. Hamas is saying that it won't disarm. Hamas, since the hostages were returned and since the peace plan came into effect and since therefore the Israelis withdrew from parts of Gaza, the Hamas have been murdering significant numbers of their opponents.
And not on the quiet. I mean, they've been filmed openly in the streets with large crowds.
We are witnessing unprecedented miracles that happen since the release of the hostages. Let's listen to this interview with Miss Julia and together with Mrs. Phillips, who has a perspective that is certainly worth listening to. Let's watch it together and we'll discuss it afterwards. Kindly subscribe to our channel so a little bit of light will push away a lot of darkness.
What do you make generally of the peace plan that Donald Trump has, at least tentatively at the start, put in place?
Well, the return of the 20 living hostages was an amazing thing. I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem. Yesterday was Simchat Torah, the festival on which 2 years ago the hostages were taken. And, we were all so overwhelmed, I think is the word. The emotions are running so high. But nevertheless, I was concerned and disturbed to hear President Trump, who deserves all credit for the return of the hostages. And, his reception here was adulatory, and that was well-deserved. But nevertheless, he said many times, the war is over. And to us here in Israel, the war is not over because, first of all, we all knew that Hamas would renege on every condition that it possibly could. And that, there is a Trump's 20-point plan which involves, among other things, the complete disarmament of Hamas. Hamas is saying that it won't disarm. Hamas, since the hostages were returned and since the peace plan came into effect and since, therefore, the Israelis withdrew from parts of Gaza, the Hamas have been murdering significant numbers of their opponents.
And not on the quiet. I mean, they've been filmed openly in the streets with large crowds.
Indeed, and it's openly for a purpose. They are demonstrating they are still there. They have not been defeated. They are in control. Now, we'll see how that pans out. But the fact is, the war is not over. And President Trump has said in the last, I think, overnight, that he is not pleased. First of all, the Hamas have broken the condition of returning all the dead hostages. 7 have been returned. One was the 8th, as you say, was turns out not to be an Israeli at all. There was 27 or 28 of them are supposed to be returned. There's a breach of that for a start. And the second point is that they have not disarmed and that they are killing people. And Trump has said they will be disarmed. Either they will voluntarily disarm or we will disarm them. Now, what does that mean? We don't know. But basically, it means that the war in real terms must continue until Trump's own conditions are met.
And the interesting thing, of course, is, when this was first announced at the White House with Netanyahu, Donald Trump made it very clear that, if Hamas don't agree and Hamas don't stick to the terms, then Israel can finish the job effectively. And this is the thing. It was so clear to me, and having been to Israel and spoken to so many people and seen, how, obsession sounds like the wrong word, but just all-encompassing thought about the hostages who were being held for the people of Israel. Everybody knew somebody, everyone also knew somebody whose child is or close relative is fighting in the IDF with mass conscription. That they were the joy at getting the hostages back, but also the joy at the prospect of peace from a war they did not start. And although we've seen scenes of jubilation and joy in Gaza, a lot of it has also been accompanied by, more chants of death to the Jews and the end of Israel. What a surprise. But the reality is, American, British or any other troops aren't going to be on the ground to defeat Hamas. It's still going to be up to Israel. And one of the other key conditions of this 20-point plan, not yet, probably never accepted by Hamas, is not just Hamas laying down their arms, but also, the acceptance of Israel's right to security, which Israel does not yet have.
Well, indeed. And one of the things that's been glossed over throughout this past terrible 2 years, not least glossed over by Israel itself, I think wrongly so, is the fact that the people who are at war, exterminatory war against Israel, are the Palestinians, the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian Authority led by Mahmoud Abbas. Now, everyone knows about Hamas, but, the war against Israel is not prosecuted by Hamas alone. Hamas is the most extreme wing because it does not put on a suit and tie, and it does not pretend to be involved in the diplomatic game. It makes no bones about the fact that it's out to murder Jews, slaughter Israelis, and destroy Israel completely through military means. And the PA, the Palestinian Authority, led by Abbas, pretends otherwise. But the fact is, it is one agenda, and that agenda is still very much on. And I'm afraid to say that, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, in particular, are leading this sort of charge of a Palestine state. I mean, they had the gall, Starmer had the gall to pretend that his recognition of a so-called Palestinian state, a complete fantasy, had something to do with the release of the hostages. On the contrary, as America and Israel repeatedly said, it had put back the release of the hostages. Now, he's still going on about this, and he will go on about this because, we can talk about this if you like, but it's a sort of an obsession of the Western liberal universalist elite represented by Starmer, that a Palestine state is the only way to solve the Arab-Israel war. And this is based on a fundamental misconception. The misconception is the idea that this patch of land is being fought over by two peoples with a right to the land. It's not so. The only people with a legal, historical, and moral right to the land are the Jews, and the Palestinian cause for the past 100 years has been involved absolutely in trying to destroy the Jews' own claim to the land. So it's an exterminatory agenda. You don't solve a problem, which is basically a war of extermination, by compromising with the exterminators.
But also the opposite of compromise have come repeatedly. I mean, even Bill Clinton has been very, very clear, has been involved in the room. Take the deal. Take the deal. 4 times. Palestinian leaders have been offered pretty much every single thing they've asked for. And they have turned it down because their aim is not a Palestinian state. Their aim is a destruction of the Jewish state of Israel.
And to all these offers, Israel was in agreement, against its better judgment, against its own security, but it felt it had no choice. But it did actually agree to this. And as you say, it was turned down. So this, people in Israel are pretty clear of what they're up against here. Unfortunately, the West is not. And another thing that worries me about the Trump 20-point plan is that his whole kind of the day after peace agenda, which has many wonderful things in it. I mean, the idea that, that the Gulf states and the Arab and Muslim world should broadly be united in recognizing Israel and making the peace, putting aside the Palestinian issue, which would no longer dominate the agenda. That is a wonderful thing. But the worm in this particular apple is Qatar, the state of Qatar, which has always been an outlier as far as the other Gulf states are concerned. It's regarded as their enemy. Qatar is the Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar is the state that has funded and supported and sheltered and advised Hamas and is still doing so. And Qatar is the state which, as the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, is the state that's most involved with subverting the West itself in order to be taken over by Islam. And as we know, Qatar has bought up huge amounts of Britain and of America and bought very large numbers of some of the most senior players in those societies to this infernal end of taking it over for Islam. Now, how can Qatar be part of a solution long term?
And they've been treated throughout this as some sort of, a broker, as opposed to the people who were harbouring the leaders of the terrorists who'd attack. And And again, this is not how we treated, the Taliban when they harboured Al Qaeda back in 2001. It's not how any other country is expected to treat them. You talk about actually, the long-term, well, basically the tentacles of Islamist, fascist extremism. I mean, it's this ideology across the Middle East, but also how its tentacles have reached into not just Britain, but across Europe and in America, particularly in universities and campuses. I would say in our media, particularly the BBC, but pretty much most of mainstream media, I think, across the board. I just want to play you a quick video. You've no doubt, I'm sure you've seen this. This is of Samuel Williams. He was an Oxford University student. And this one of the chants that he led at the latest supposedly pro-Palestinian march last Saturday. Have a watch and a listen.
I don't want to yap for too long, but a chant that we've been workshopping in Oxford that maybe you guys want to join in. It goes, Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground. Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground. Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground.
I mean, fairly typical of the sort of rather sad, pathetic, inadequate sort of incel, hate mongers that we've seen in our streets. I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that in the last hour or so we learnt that not only is Samuel Williams of Balliol College, Oxford University, a PPE student, supposedly our brightest and best, is now under police investigation. He's also now been suspended by the University of Oxford, who condemn what he had to say pending that police investigation. Is this at least the start, do you think, Melanie Phillips, of perhaps us basically taking on the blatant, outrageous hatred and death threats on our streets from these supposedly virtue-signalling good people?
Forgive my note of weariness. I do hope so, but I suspect not. I mean, this guy's suspension and investigation by the police is obviously very welcome. It comes after, even by the standards of sluggish people who are slow to respond to this kind of thing, it produced absolute outrage. The boy was calling for the murder of countless Jews. Now, that should have been dealt with immediately. The police should have been there immediately this was shown and arrested him for incitement to murder. And Oxford should have dismissed him, not just suspended him, thrown him out. Now, that's him, and that's a particularly extreme example. But unfortunately, although it's extreme, it's part of a trend in which we have seen, in the demonstrations on the streets of Britain for the past 2 years, people calling for the extermination of Israel and the death of Jews. Now, the death of Jews has been often dressed up in Arabic chants, but everybody by now should know what they mean. And the police have done absolutely nothing. Yep. And behind all that, behind, the British state standing back and saying it's free speech to incite the murder of Jews and the destruction of Israel, which are both crimes under English law. In addition to that, you have a situation in which this is against the backdrop of an entire, quote, human rights, close quote, humanitarian establishment, which has effectively turned mass murder into an issue of conscience. Yeah. This is the most terrible thing, that people are parading around, people of great ignorance, obviously, of the Middle East, great ignorance of Jews. Some of them may be, innately prejudiced against Jews, but many of them are simply ignorant, and they're going along with a sort of fashionable crowd. Yeah. But the humanitarian establishment, which people look to as the kind of arbiters of truth and justice and conscience, they have basically been painting the Israelis as not just wrong, not just behaving badly, but as evil, as demonic, people who deliberately cause the killing and starvation of babies, of children, of civilians. All of this is a lie, but put that to one side, the fact that it is a lie. it has incited people into the belief that the Israelis are fundamentally the most evil people in the world.
Yep.
Now, if you have that situation, it's not surprising that people are going to say, well, what do you do with people who are effectively Nazis, for that's what the Israeli Jews are being called, people who are evil, people who are demonic? You have to get rid of them. And so you have this innately, potentially murderous discourse, which has been framed as conscience and compassion and human rights.
And these are the good people. And then when you have, a prime minister who allows his MPs, even some of his own ministers, to talk about, again, fake stories, fake claims about genocide and the like. And then you have 2 men murdered at a synagogue for being Jewish. This is it. Melanie, I'm final brief word, but I'm going to have to go to a break.
This is the most disgusting thing about Keir Starmer. Not only is he
among the many disgusting things about Keir Starmer,
this mythical state of Palestine, whose existence and hypothetical existence is only to destroy Israel, he has done nothing to say that the incitement against Jews and Israel is based on a lie, and consequently, he is complicit in this near pogrom atmosphere in Britain.
I absolutely agree. Melanie Phillips, columnist for The Times, author of The Builder's Stone, How Jews and Christians Built the West and Why Only They Can Save It.
And Mrs. Melanie Phillips, columnist at The Times, has always been a very clear thinker and a truth seeker. And together with Julia, they were having this conversation that is needed to have had. The reality is we're not dealing with a partner in peace. They are not interested in peace. And they have made it very clear from the beginning. They only have one interest, and that is the destruction of Israel, the annihilation of the Jewish people. So when we're dealing with a group, I don't even want to call them people, but individuals, who makes it very clear that they are going to repeat October 7 again and again and again, it needs to help us understand who our enemy is and what kind of enemy we have. Many countries have gone to war with neighbors over boundary lines, but this is not about that. This is about annihilation. This is about eradicating Jewish people from Israel, from our homeland. In the Jewish calendar, we begin reading from the book of Genesis every year after the high holiday season. And we begin reading from the very beginning, and we go through the 52 weeks of the year, every week reading a different portion. This week, as we read the book of Genesis, there's a great commentator. His name is Rashi. 1,500 years ago, he wrote an interesting commentary on the very first verse of the whole Bible. The very first verse of the Bible starts out, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then God said, let there be light." So he asks the question, why does the Bible begin with creation? Why not begin with commandments? The Bible is predominantly about commandments, about laws. So why not start the Bible with the commandments and the laws? Why start it with the story of creation? And this is what he wrote 1,500 years ago. He said, the reason why we begin the Bible with creation is to set the record straight for the world to know. In the beginning of time, God created the world. The world belongs to God. What we have is God's possession. God chooses who lives where. And God gave the land of Israel to Jewish people as recorded in the Bible. We not only have the Bible to back us up, but archaeologists are continuously uncovering from different digs from thousands of years ago, from King David's days, to show that King David was there. Indisputable that the Jewish people were the ones who lived in Israel for the last 3,337 years. And the commentator goes on to say, there may become a time, this is his prophecy, he said there's going to be a time that people are going to say, leave the land does not belong to you. And he said, you just point to the finger, show them where in the Bible it says that God gave us the land. God chose to give the Jewish people the land of Israel. So this commentator had a foresight of what's going to be happening now in the 21st century. That we have to deal with this. That people are questioning who belongs in Israel. Who does Israel belong to? Judaism is the oldest religion. Judaism has been here for 3,337 years. Way before Christianity and Islam was even an idea. And in the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, unequivocally, very clearly stated that the land, the real state of Israel in the Middle East, belongs to the Jewish people. And we have lived there for thousands of years until the Romans came, destroyed the temple, and dispersed us amongst the nations. And we have been on the run since, until after World War II. In 1948, after being decimated by the horrors of the Holocaust, we were 15 million Jews in population in the world before the Holocaust. We lost over 6 million. A third of our nation was gone. We are now 15 million. We have just now came back to the same population as we were before the Holocaust. But in comparison to how many Christians out there, how many Muslims out there, we are a fraction. We're less than 2%. But yet God said, you have a responsibility. You need to be a light unto the nations. And you need to be able to be the ones to bless. Whoever you bless will be blessed. And this is what Israel has been thriving to do for the last 77 years. We turned the desolate, deserted land of Israel in the desert, turned it into a first world country where 9 million people can live comfortably and in peace and coexist with each other. Yes, there are 2 million Arabs currently living in proper Israel. And they would prefer to live in Israel than any other place in the Middle East because of the democracy and the freedoms that they enjoy. So we certainly hope the world can see and appreciate what Israel is all about and what the Jewish people stand for. You partner with us, you will benefit in insurmountable of ways. God bless you. God loves you.